Hey everyone, welcome back, and thank you for taking a few minutes to be here today, because there is one question that just refuses to go away, and honestly, I understand why. People are struggling, prices are still high, and for months now, the same thing keeps coming up over and over again in the comments. Is 2026 finally going to be the year of the long-rumored $2,000 stimulus check? Is it real? Is it actually happening? Who would get it? And when would it arrive? These questions are flooding in every single day. And today I want to slow things down, clear through the noise, and lay everything out for you in a clear, realistic, and honest way. Over the past few months, this $2,000 figure has been talked about repeatedly, not just by commentators online, but floated directly out of the president himself. That's where the confusion really started to build. People heard different versions of the same idea, different names attached to it, different dollar amounts at different times, and it left a lot of people wondering whether this was just another rumor or something that might actually materialize. Dividend payments, rebate payments, distributions, stimulus checks, the wording changed, but the core idea stayed exactly the same. The idea was simple on the surface. Take incoming revenue, particularly from tariffs, and redistribute a portion of that money back to the American people, with a clear emphasis on low-income and middle-income households. Throughout 2025, we heard multiple versions of this concept discussed publicly. Some proposals were bigger, some smaller, some more detailed than others. There was even one idea that stood completely on its own, which most people now recognize as unrealistic and separate from everything else. But when you strip that one out of the conversation, what remains is a consistent message. Again and again, the administration made it clear that they were exploring ways to return money directly to a large portion of the population. Not a narrow group, not a tiny slice of people, but a broad segment of Americans who are feeling financial pressure. What's important to understand is where this money was supposedly coming from. The administration repeatedly pointed to tariff revenues as the primary source. The explanation was that a portion of that incoming money could be redistributed in the form of dividends or rebates. And beyond that, there were also mentions of contingency plans, backup options that could still result in payments even if the original tariff-based plans didn't unfold exactly as expected. The message, at least rhetorically, was that no matter what path they took, the goal was to get money back into people's hands. Now let's shift the focus specifically to 2026, because this is where timing becomes incredibly important. Late in the year, particularly in November and December, the president made comments that clarified the expected window for these payments, saying mid to later 2026. That timing alone raised eyebrows for a lot of people, and it shouldn't be surprising why. If you've been paying attention to how these things usually work, you already know that major distributions like this are rarely random. They tend to line up with moments when they matter most politically. Let's be honest for a moment, without turning this into a political argument. If a $2,000 payment does happen, and that's still a big if, the timing would not be accidental. Mid to late 2026 just happens to land right before the midterm elections. That's not a coincidence, no matter how carefully the wording is framed around helping people when they need it most. Historically, these kinds of financial moves tend to appear when lawmakers stand to gain the most from public approval. That doesn't automatically mean it won't happen, but it does help explain why 2026 keeps being mentioned instead of any other year. And here's a critical point that doesn't get talked about enough. If this kind of payment is going to happen at all, outside of a full-blown economic emergency, 2026 is really the only year where it makes sense from a political standpoint. Beyond that year, there is very little incentive for lawmakers to push through something like this. There's no midterm election pressure, no immediate political benefit. So when people ask whether this could happen in 2027 or later, the realistic answer is that it becomes far less likely unless something much bigger forces their hand. Now let's set politics aside for just a moment and talk about the economy, because this is the other massive factor that could change everything. If the economy continues to weaken, and we see worsening data across employment, consumer spending, and overall growth, the conversation changes completely. In the event of a serious recession, the timeline stops mattering. Whether it's 2026, 2027, or any other year, stimulus becomes almost unavoidable. That's the entire purpose of stimulus in the first place, to inject money into the economy when it's slowing down or contracting. We've already seen what that looks like before. In 2020 and 2021, trillions of dollars were pumped into the system in a very short period of time. At the time, it felt massive, unprecedented even. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If the next major economic downturn hits, and many experts believe it could be worse due to the sheer scale of national and global debt, those numbers could look small in comparison. A deeper recession would likely require an even larger response, potentially well beyond what we've already experienced. So when we talk about 2026, there are really two major forces at play. The first is guaranteed, the midterm elections. They are happening, no question about it. The second is uncertain, but increasingly concerning, the overall health of the economy. Either one of these factors on its own could push lawmakers toward some form of direct payment. If both collide at the same time, the pressure becomes even stronger. As for the $2,000 figure itself, that's the number that continues to be floated publicly. It hasn't changed much, and that consistency is why people keep asking about it. But it's important to understand that nothing is final until legislation is passed. Amounts can change, eligibility rules can shift, and timelines can move. Right now, all we have are repeated signals, not a signed guarantee. One of the biggest worries I see in the comments comes from people on fixed incomes. Social Security recipients, SSDI, survivors' benefits, retirees, people who rely on monthly payments that don't stretch as far as they used to. There's a real fear that they'll be forgotten or excluded. Historically, though, eligibility has almost always come down to income, not the source of that income. Lawmakers typically don't care whether your money comes from wages, Social Security, retirement, or disability. What they look at is how much you make in total. In past stimulus programs, the thresholds were fairly consistent, roughly $75,000 per year for individuals and about $150,000 for married couples. If your income falls below those levels, you were generally eligible. If it was above, you usually were not. There's no reason to believe that framework would suddenly change dramatically if another payment were approved. So the key question isn't what benefits you receive, it's whether your total income falls below whatever threshold they decide to set. At the end of the day, we're still in a waiting phase. There is no official legislation, no final approval, no confirmed payment date. What we do have are strong signals, repeated discussions, and a political and economic landscape that makes 2026 a very interesting year to watch. Whether this turns into an actual $2,000 check or fades into another unrealized proposal remains to be seen. What I can promise you is this: I'll continue watching everything closely. As soon as real, confirmed information comes out, I'll break it down clearly and honestly, so you know exactly where things stand and how it affects you. Until then, stay alert, stay informed, and don't let rumors alone drive your expectations. If 2025 felt busy and unpredictable, buckle up, because 2026 has the potential to be even more intense. Thank you for being here, thank you for your trust, and I'll see you again very soon in the next update.